Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 146 of What a Piece of Junk, the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I am your agreeable host, Scott Bultman, and joining me, as always, to talk some wars is my original podcast co-pilot, Mr. Derrick Marsh. Derrick, how's it going?
It's going good. It is feeling more and more like summer. We've got hot weather. And for once, we're not actually focused around Tatooine. We're
That's
actually
right.
feeling like there's something else going around in the universe of Star Wars as we finally get to end somewhat, maybe tail end of the High Republic, beginning of the Grand Republic, but at least not within the Skywalker saga at this point. So this is
Precisely. Every
new territory.
Everybody wants to go back to Jakku? No. We're having new locations and new planets, new characters, and new, for lack of a better term, star dates. Although I can go into more detail about how that isn't really a part of Star Wars, but we can't discuss things like metric time without my original Wookiee co-pilot, our very own Dave Filcloni, Mr. Miracle himself, the man of 1,000 nicknames. It's Nathan Miracle. Nathan, welcome back to the Drunken Gungan.
Why, thank you. I am glad to be here. Glad to be talking Star Wars. And Derek, you might be happy that it's feeling like summer, but I'm not. I do not like the heat.
Wookiees don't like heat, huh?
That's right.
No,
It's
no,
all that
no.
fur.
I shed. It's terrible.
You might want to get that looked at.
Well, now you have a kindred spirit in Jedi Master Kel Naka, played
Yes.
admirably at the tail end of Episode 2 of Star Wars The Acolyte by our very own Eunice Suetomo, who is, of course, the guy who took over as Chewbacca in the sequel trilogy. But it's so cool to see him suiting up again to play a Wookiee. And this time, not just any Wookiee, but finally a live-action Wookiee Jedi. Of course, we've had an animated Wookiee Jedi before with Gungi, but not a live-action Wookiee Jedi. So how cool was that? And in case you haven't guessed, listeners, tonight's episode of the podcast is all about Star Wars The Acolyte and the first two episodes that were shown just last week. We are recording this episode of What a Piece of Junk on June the 9th, and we're looking forward to a short 2 days from now, we'll be able to watch episode 3 of Star Wars The Acolyte on Disney+. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, guys, and then after the break, we'll take a little bit of a Star Wars gaming interlude. But for now, let's talk about the first two episodes of Star Wars The Acolyte. They were Lost/Found, and then Revenge/Justice. So, I guess, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched these episodes before now, go ahead and stop the podcast and go see what's up, because this is very much turning into a mystery kind of show, and so we don't want to ruin it for you if you're slowly making your way toward getting into the series. So I will do the official spoiler alert sound effect, because I haven't done it in, like, forever. All right, there we go. So you have been warned. So yeah, guys, the major thing I wanted to talk about as we begin our discussion of the series is that whole theory that somebody had out there that we talked about offline, not on an episode of the podcast, that we were going to have twins as the protagonist, turned out to be 100% correct. Were you surprised about this, Derek?
I mean, I ended up. This kind of is what actually got me to really be engaged with the first episode, because at first I thought it was just going to be, here we are with this character, she gets this, does with the Carrie Moss Jedi, kills her. And then all of a sudden we get this cutscene at right at the beginning then, and it goes into what looks like her on a ship, and she's a mechanic. I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. We're going to see, like, following along, since the show is called The Acolyte, like, we're actually going to follow along, like, kind of like how Dexter is, right? Where you're seeing this person in a day-to-day, but behind closed doors, they're a complete mystery, and then they turned out to be a killer, right? But then it wasn't. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, is this going to be where we have because I've seen enough horror movies where we have, oh, my twin sister died, or she was never fully born and she was still part of me in the womb. And because we're both force sensitive, she could take over my mind and it's going to be a split personality. And I was like,
Ooh.
okay, I'm in for this too, because we kind of maybe have like a horror element, suspense thriller in this. And then it finds out, no, it's just two twins. And I'm like, okay, I'm still enticed, but I thought one of my first two ideas was maybe going to be a little bit better. But no, super excited for this. It's finally here and ready to talk. But yeah, that really got me. But as you were saying, Scott, twins, especially force sensitive twins, plays a big role within Star Wars. We obviously have Luke and Leia, and then we have even the twins from the Vision season 1 episode where we have that, and then everything that's twins is very iconic in Star Wars, like the twin sons, right? We had in A New Hope, and through that stuff. But yeah, so here we are, twins again.
Yeah. Nathan, were you surprised that it turned out to be just literal twins? One seemingly good, one seemingly evil?
No, it's just straight up no. I didn't piece it together until the guy burst in and said, "It was her. I saw her. She was the one at my bar. She killed somebody and totally messed up my bar." And as soon as he said that, I thought, there's no way they do that, and it's not a mistaken identity situation. That it would be too simple and straightforward for it to just be like, yes, that's her, found her, and that'd be right. So as soon as he said that, I was watching with my girlfriend Andrea, and we looked at each other and said, "Do we think that she's a twin?" And we just nodded at each other. Yeah, pretty much. And lo and behold, we were right. I did get thrown off the scent a little bit when she saw the, I presume, force vision of her young sister as a younger kid. I thought maybe her twin had died and somehow was like manifesting through the force, but no, it turned out to not be that either. Just straight up, we have twins.
Yeah.
But
I
we
put
figured
it
out pretty early.
together the day before I watched the first two episodes. I went back and watched the trailers some more, and I was like, wait, I think that might be a case of how could she be in both of those places at the same time? Because it very much felt like things were happening concurrently. And so when I saw Osha doing stuff on the ship and then May doing stuff, in the bar, I was like, oh, not only do I think that we're going to have identical twins that are essentially on opposite sides of the Force, which is just very poetic, I think that we're going to have them be a dyad in the Force, like Rey and Kylo Ren back in the sequel trilogy. And Palpatine's comment about how that's super rare will still hold true, because this would have been, more than 100 years before that happened. And so I'm looking forward to whether or not they really are a dyad in the Force, and maybe exploring that concept some more. But I also enjoyed the fact that we now have twins, and it's very apparent. I'm glad they didn't try to stretch it out and be like, oh, are they twins? Are they not? Do. We're very upfront about it in episode 1, right? But I like that now that we notice that I feel like all the episodes are going to be something/something, because it's one word is from Osha's perspective and one word is from May's perspective.
Which word?
Exactly. Perfect fodder for podcasts like us, let's be honest. All right, so let's jump into the 5 questions, unless anybody else has another overarching thing they want to talk about here.
No, it'll be interesting, though, as we go through this, guys, right, through this season, because they've already announced that we're getting a season 2, right? So what is the big reveal at the end going to be, right? I don't know if we need to go into that to this episode, right? But what is the end of episode 8 going to be? And how is that going to lead into a season 2? So,
right. Okay, so question number 1: what did you like best about these episodes, Nathan?
The thing I liked most about this episode, it is set 100 years before the start of the Empire. Yoda is very much alive, and we didn't see him. when I saw the exact time frame, I thought, oh man, they're going to have a Yoda cameo. He's going to be teaching younglings or something, and we didn't get that at all. I think it took a lot of restraint for them to not put in that cameo. Chewbacca also should be alive at this point because he's about 200 in A New Hope. So he'd be young but still alive, and they didn't show him either. And I think that's actually good. We have a clean break. This is not Skywalker saga, and we have been asking for that. We have been wanting
Yes.
something that is not in that time frame of Anakin and Luke being around. So I was very happy to see, or rather, not see that.
Right. Yeah. Totally. All right, Derek, what did you like best about these episodes?
I liked that exactly, to the point what Nathan was saying, right? It still feels like Star Wars, right? But again, just like we kind of felt like when we praised Andor, right? It had nothing to do with the Jedi in that, right? It was a full perspective that we loved about Rogue One. This is the same thing where yes, it feels like Star Wars, it looks like Star Wars, but it has nothing to do, like Nathan said, with the Skywalker saga. But what I really enjoyed about this so far, at least these first couple episodes, it's leaned on more of the mythology and the mythical concept of what Jedi are, and to some degree even what Sith are, right? From us just knowing history and what we get, and you get to really see that to extreme levels. Almost anime, manga, old schools, 50s through 70s Asian movies, right? With the styles.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it, right? You could see with the fight scene in episode 1, it's very Matrix slash Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon feel. And then in episode 2, we get a more of that between May and Soul. Even a little bit of felt like John Wick with some of the hand-to-hand combat stuff. But also, again, anime and manga style when they're doing Master. Oh, now that my head's doing the gentleman floating, meditating. Master, I
Oh,
can't think.
it starts with an O. Do 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 do.
Oh, it just escaped it. I was all about
Sorry,
it.
Torben. Jedi Master
Turban.
Torben.
Torben.
Yeah.
Torben.
Or
Yes.
Corbin, yes, starting
Yes.
with T.
Yeah. So,
Like I
anyways,
said, it starts with a T.
T.O. Torben. So,
Yeah, there you go.
but it was cool, right? Because he's just sitting there floating, and she couldn't crack him, right? With her assassin skills, and we almost got like this where they finally reveal like she's got these 4 trials she has to do based off this murder mystery type deal that we got, but it's not really initially too much of a mystery that we're finding out because we get that revealed in episode 2, right? It's kind of quick with it, which is nice, right? It's not the slow burn type deal. Obviously we'll talk a bit about as we progress here. What do we think? The Jedi, the 4 Jedi that she wants to kill, what happened, or what they did. But no, just it's been really good so far. And like I said, I enjoy it because they are giving us almost like that comic book and novel feel that we're so used to from all the way from the 90s, Legends canon and all that other stuff. So enjoying it.
Yeah. For me, am I allowed to say my favorite part was all of it? I thought it was so
Yeah.
great. As a big fan of Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO and the video game Knights of the Old Republic, it was super great for me to see all of these influences from that era being brought out in live action. The way that the Jedi dress, the individualized lightsaber hilts for all the Jedi, the overall atmosphere of the galaxy at large was just so much a lived in, active world. I thought it was cool to see the Nemoidians and a reference to the Trade Federation. All that stuff was very interesting and very atmospheric. And then this mystery of why is May, first of all, how is May alive when several Jedi were seemingly convinced that May was dead? And 2, why is she killing Jedi? What did they do, right, to deserve her ire, And then, of course, who is that dark side guy that we saw standing on the beach talking to May? It's just a really great way to take a traditional murder mystery kind of almost serial killer plot and plop it right into the Star Wars universe. Just so far, very well done. I can't wait to watch this week's coming episode, part 3. and I'm looking forward to whatever they do next. And I also really loved seeing that we had a new type of droid and a new type of alien. The guy who was one of the convicts on the prisoner transport alongside May or Osha was that dude with like the weird tentacle head. You almost assume that it's like that's his tongue, and he helped use his tongue to escape from the prison ship. Although that did, make me think, geez, how terrible is or Republic security in that they didn't know that guy's species had that capability. And I think it's more of just the hubris of the Jedi is continuing to be on full display here about them thinking, we can just have a bunch of droids transport these prisoners. I mean, where are they going to go? And in defense of the Jedi peacekeepers, they did recapture all of those guys almost lickety-split, even though they escaped and the ship got crashed. So I guess they're just out some droids and whatnot. Anyway, but yes, those were some of my favorite things. All right, so question number 2. What did you like least about these episodes, Derrick?
Well, it was kind of funny because that was going to be one of my things I disliked about this was it's like, okay, we're going for Con Air here. We're going to put all the bad guys that together, not hand tie them up or anything, right? Like we would see normally. Like heck, even Jyn Erso had handcuffs on, right? So, all the things that they would do, they're all just together, right? And like you said, so. To that point, it's like, well, had they actually, instead of trying to blow up the ship, just actually seize the ship because they could have done that. Though it was really cool with the pilot droids ended up just turning into the chairs. That was pretty cool too.
That was
so
cool.
That way,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool, like that. So that way, if you have a real pilot, it's there. If not, then the chairs
It made me think of Airplane. Do you remember Airplane where they're like, engage
when
the
they blow up the
autopilot?
Oh, surely you can't be serious.
Yes, Shirley.
I am
Don't
serious.
call me Shirley.
Don't call me Shirley. Good
But
times.
anyways, but like I said, it wasn't the end of the world. No, the only thing I like I said, I praise it at the same time that I did from question 1. But the other thing was it's like, okay, they don't literally have to fit every trope though. Like it is going to almost be too predictable. So I'm hoping, again, it's only 2 episodes so far out of 8. Again, I like the fast pace to your point. We're getting straight to it. We're not dragging out the stories. Great. But it's like every trope, it's like, okay, are we just, not that Star Wars is afraid of stealing stuff and rehashing in the Star Wars world. We know that, but it's like, okay, can you come up with some original stuff though, at least, right? Some original concepts. Like I said, my earlier comment about the twins, it's like, okay, you can do something other than just being simply, oh, there's identical twins, right? Be clever in that. So that would, like I said, be the only thing so far. So hopefully we'll get a bit more not predictable to what Nathan was even saying, earlier when he was saying, we just pointed out right then and there, they're twins, right? So, hopefully that'll be something we I guess, they get a little bit more originality. But other than that, I'm with you, Scott, for the most part. I'm just nitpicking at this point. There really isn't anything that I just flat out hated. A couple times you might roll your eyes on something, right? But other than that, it was very enjoyable, both episodes. So I am too looking forward to episode 3 this Tuesday.
Yeah. I think I'm sort of piggybacking on Derrick here. My only very minor complaints were that we had a few cliches that felt not Star Warsy. First of all, was the Denovan neural parasite taking over the guy. I'm sorry, that's Star Trek. First of all, was the parasite
Facehugger.
taking over the guy. That's right, the facehugger. So he was either a facehugger, a Denovan neural parasite from Star Trek, or insert any other random. Futurama. You must go to the brain slug planet. Do not wear hats. And so it was just so cliche. And I'm like, we've never really had that kind of thing in live action Star Wars before, mind you. In the old expanded universe for Star Wars, the Yuzon Vong had all kinds of parasitical, symbiotic technology, blah, 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 stuff they put on themselves, stuff they put on other people, living biological entities to be weapons or whatever. So yeah, old school EU, creepy body horror from the 1990s, I get it. Current new millennium Star Wars, we don't need parasites. I didn't really even like Borgullet will know the truth from,
Maybe it's a
Rogue
mini
One.
Borgullet.
Yeah, it did remind me about Gauntlet.
Maybe
Yeah,
that's
it was
before
the same
Gauntlet lays
concept.
eggs.
Now I'm thinking of the torture that they used in Andor, where they played the morning song of the dead aliens that would make you go insane unless you agreed to the Empire's demands. Anyway, all that stuff aside, I also was a little put off by the it's poison. It's poison made from a particular plant from our home planet. I mean, I saw that coming a mile away. Whenever
She just has like a huge bag of it too. You know what I mean?
yeah. And I'm like, I had just watched an episode of Star Trek Discovery in their final season where there was, creepy poison being used by Maul and Locke. And I'm like, really? Poison? I mean, did we have some sort of summer convention last year where there was a writer's workshop about poison in science fiction, how it can help you succeed? Because it just felt so on the nose. Also, I'm kind of like weirded out as to why Jedi Master Torian would just go ahead and drink the poison, which I'm sure we will find out. But that kind of bugged me that he would do that. I'm like,
It's so atrocious that
I get that you need to show me your poison is super lethal, etc. But like, I would have preferred May to like dip the daggers in it and like throw them at him and somehow overcome the force block. But I mean, the writers decided they wanted to go for poison because it would be easy to connect it to the two girls together, the two twins, and the planet of Brindok. So yes, but it was a little cliched. But not so bad that I hated the episode or anything. I mean, it's not like I'm going to be moaning and complaining about fire in outer space, right, Nathan? Did you
Oh
wanna
my
talk
gosh,
about
I've
that now?
seen so many complaints about that. But I'm not putting that as one of the things I liked least about the show because we've had plenty of fire in outer space in Star Wars. Star Wars outer space does not work the same way as our outer space and never has. X-wings bank, TIE fighters make noise. Um, Leia and Han walked around in an asteroid with nothing but rebreathers on. Uh, it's just not the same as our outer space.
Look,
Plus,
man, we can have physics or we can have the Force. We tried having them both, but we tore the galaxy apart. There, I said it. It's like my
thank you,
catchphrase around here.
thank you.
cameo.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, you could easily explain. Well, there's an atmosphere coming from the ship itself. That's why the fire started. So that. Yeah, it probably wouldn't look like that in our outer space, but please stop making these complaints that have nothing to do with the plot of the show. Anyways, I'm going to get off my soapbox on that and go with my actual least favorite thing about these two episodes, and that is the interaction between Master Vernestra and Master Soul when they first see each other at the Jedi Temple. Because we get one of those conversations where they are clearly telling each other things for the benefit of the audience. Master Vernestra, whom I'm going to address very formally so that anyone who might be overhearing this knows exactly who you are. Yes, Master Soul, my old friend, whom I have known for many years.
Look, they're just extremely formal in their relationship, okay, man? That's all there is to it.
Yeah, sure. That particular scene just kind of took me out of it. I'm like, okay, you're clearly
Greetings, Captain Exposition.
exactly like, yeah. This is definitely here for my benefit. I now know who these characters are. This is not something they would actually say to each other. And the weird part about it, to me, is right afterwards they introduced or reintroduced Yord, the I'm calling him the Paladin Jedi because he very much feels like a D&D Paladin. I have
With a yellow lightsaber.
Yeah, yellow lightsaber. He's like, I've got my way of doing things. And, I'm very much sticking to this oath and all of that. But they introduced him by having that Padawan say, "Oh, it's not going to be Yord, is it? I mean, he's Yord." And then we open up to him with no shirt on. And he's like, "I'm ready to go on the mission." It's like, okay, that is a good introduction.
I like the people online referring to him as Jedi Master Killmonger because of the way he looks and the hairstyle and the face and yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see it. I can see where they're coming with that. That was a good introduction because that feels like a conversation that two people would actually have about this third person. Whereas when Master Vernestra and Master Soul, introduce themselves to each other as people who have known each other for an extremely long time. No, that was a terrible introduction.
Yeah, but you'll also notice though that conversation though was definitely very hubris, Venestro, and definitely could say, "Oh, she must be the one that partially trains Mace Windu at some point, or Kiadi Mundi," because yeah, which I will be. I haven't done all this investigation right to see, but I'm curious. People who have really liked the High Republic era of things because she's a Padawan or young character in the early stages of the High Republic, and now she's older and she's definitely not main character material anymore, right? Like feels like she's part of this political Jedi ploy type deal feel, right? Which definitely is what Yord is too, right? The whole point of him being very, like, well, I'm a Jedi, right? And I can do whatever, and if anyone's going to go to the dark side, he'd be the guy that goes to the dark side, to be honest. So
yeah. It's often the people who are
Filled
so
with his own
rigid.
hubris.
Yeah, so rigid in their beliefs, so inflexible that when something pushes them, instead of bending, they break.
Yeah.
There's
totally.
your season 2 right there.
Boom.
Yord goes
Yes,
to the
we
dark
gotta
side.
fight Yord. Yeah. All right, well, this is normally the part of our 5 questions things where we do a number 3 question, what connections did you make to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy? But because this is set before any of the stories that we've seen on television before, we're going to modify that a bit for our analysis of the Acolyte, and we're going to talk about what new things did you notice about the Star Wars galaxy at this moment that you enjoyed. So I'll kick it off by saying I loved seeing a different kind of droid, in this case, Pip. Now, I know that all the Fallout fans will be like, oh, it's just some sort of a Pip-Boy ripoff. But not really, because it wasn't a handheld computer. This thing was autonomous, could fly around, walk around, do things on his own. And I love the idea of basically having essentially a tricorder droid. If you think about it in Star Trek terms, because he's about that size, almost like a pad, or maybe, an iPad or a tablet computer. But he's
a
thick
Swiss
enough to
Army
have,
knife.
Yeah, he's have all the Swiss Army knife attachments and multiple uses and whatnot, which was so cool. I loved seeing him have a fire extinguisher for the fire in space, just like R2-D2 in The Phantom Menace. I loved seeing him be able to do, like, welding stuff. Of course, he was some kind of a scanner. You could connect him to a data port and do all
I
kinds
loved
of
how his
things
head
like you
was the
normally do.
pocket, like the actual like wrench or socket thing to break out. That was
Yeah.
funny. She's like, "Sorry, I don't
that
mean to
was
take
cool.
your head with you." It just ripped
Yeah,
it off.
yeah. She would just disconnect parts of him to like do this and then put him back together, and he was all like, "Hey," 'cause he seems so. A lot of droids often will seem like a pet, like a dog or a cat. Pip seems like a parrot or maybe a cockatiel, and you pull a piece off of him, but then later he can sort of fly around and be like, "Hey, what you doing?"
Was he voiced by Seth Green?
I don't know, but that would be awesome. Anyway, so yeah, that was my major thing, and I also really liked seeing mech techs. The idea of human engineers or biological engineers that could go out into very hazardous situations and work on the ships. And I like the idea that somehow that is against regulations, but clearly people are doing it because it's cheaper. It's another opportunity for Star Wars to help teach us about how anytime people are able to exploit others, they're gonna do it regardless of whether or not the regulations requiring you to not do it are logical, compassionate, whatever. If they can save a few coin, the Trade Federation especially is all about, oh yeah, let's just use the mech techs. They don't really count for anything and they're a lot cheaper than droids. At least I got the impression that it was cheaper than droids. I mean, otherwise, why would they not just use droids? because we definitely have the capability technologically at this moment in time, because I believe Yord and a few of the other Jedi talked to the Trade Federation representatives in episode 1 about, you wouldn't be having humans do that stuff out there instead of astromechs, would you? Or words
Oh
to
no,
that
that would
effect.
be illegal.
Certainly not.
do we think
Our
this
mech
is-
techs are perfectly legal.
Do you think this is where, obviously, we got a long ways to go before she'd be even born and go into this, but do you think this is the original career that Pelimoto went into? Was a mechanic?
Yeah, I can
What is it?
see.
Is it
I
mech,
can see.
mech tech? Thank you,
Mech,
I get the
mech
term.
neck.
That's it.
MEK, according to the
And I wonder what
the
the etymology
trace.
there is. Why mech neck? And not
It
mech
almost sounds like a
tech?
corruption of mechanic.
I guess.
Yeah,
so.
it is. It's a mechanic, right? But I'm assuming it's something to do that it was a slang term for somebody in that field, right? Like it's kind of a lower level mechanic, right? Like because to your point, you're almost not quite like a slave, but you're kind of thrust into these situations that would normally be held by droids. Ironically, her name is Osha, right? As we talk about
Yes,
current meta
yes.
stuff, right?
And
So-
she almost falls off a cliff, and all I could think is, if you had some handrails there. I noticed there's no handrails here.
so maybe down the line we'll get some TikTok videos of them like doing like that one guy who comes in, he does like just a typical day at work, and it shows like all these videos of people like going to these horrendous
Yes.
situations,
Yes.
and he's just like staring in the background, where the edit is. So maybe we can get him to do like a Star Wars one with all the
Yeah,
things.
where he's constantly looking at all these terrible work conditions and like doing his thing where he's all.
So
There's a guy who did a modified version of that where he goes to a new gym. Like he's been working out at some particular gym for a long time, but he has to go join a new gym for some reason. And he walks in and he's got himself as like that dude who looks at the camera, but then he stitches in other videos of people working out in the most extreme ways. And he just keeps going. Yeah, it's really good. Anyway, but yes, I'd love to see the work guy do
Star Wars
the
edition.
version. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Anyway, Nathan, what did you notice is new stuff in this era of Star Wars?
So the Jedi have long been sort of samurai with the Kurosawa film inspirations, and May's fighting style really feels like ninja. So we're finally getting ninja versus samurai, which I think is awesome. Yes, it's a bit cliche. I don't care. It was awesome. She's
Space
throwing
ninja.
ninja stars. She's being very treacherous. Like, okay, I know that I can't beat Carrie-Anne Moss, but if I throw my ninja star at that innocent bystander over there, she'll let her guard down long enough for me to get her. Which bold move to get Carrie-Anne Moss and have her die like in the opening sequence.
Yeah.
I've seen some people say, "Oh, there's no way she's dead." I think she is. I think they just went for
we'll
the
get
bold
some
move there.
flashbacks, but that'll be it because we have to obviously understand what Brendok's all about. But
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, she
Okay,
just
cool.
pulled a Guyver, right? Scott, you'll
Yes.
remember that movie.
Yes. I watched The Guyver. I watched it because of Mark Hamill. I'll fully
Yes,
admit
for
that,
first
but
10 minutes, and then
yeah, exactly. But then I enjoyed the rest of the film. I'm like, oh my gosh, they killed Luke in the first 10 minutes, But then the rest of the movie was pretty good.
who's on the poster like the whole thing?
Yeah, he's
Go
like
see Mark
the
Hamill.
major face on the poster.
And very similarly, Trinity's in this. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's done all this publicity for the past 2 weeks.
Yep, and dead.
Yeah,
At least Mace
when
Windu lasted 3 movies.
it first happened, when it first came out, and episode 1 of The Acolyte had finished, on social media, I kept seeing people like, "Oh my gosh, they killed Trinity in the first," and or they killed Carrie-Anne Moss, and I would just always reply, "Max von Sydow says hi." Because they killed him in the
That is
first
true.
5 minutes of The Force Awakens, right?
That is
it's
true.
like it's the guy from Conan the Barbarian. It's the guy from fill in the blank here for Max von Sydow. It's Ming the Merciless. Nope, he's dead.
Yeah, and people had the same reaction there. It's like, there's no way he's actually dead. Yeah, he kind of is.
Yep. All right, Derek, what did you find new in the era of the galaxy right now?
So for the listeners out there, listen to the Culture Clash on this week's episode that's going to be dropping. I'm sure we'll share it on the What a Piece of Junk Facebook page because I joined Kevin and Kyle talk a little bit about the Acolyte and some other things in pop culture. But kind of just letting you guys know too as well, I just recently finished the Audible version of The Light of the Jedi, which was the first novel that came out in 2021, which was really kind of the official kickoff for Star Wars and Disney in this new High Republic era. It was the first publication, that we got in a novel form. We've even talked about it in the previous couple episodes back when we were talking about some of these top 10 or whatever stories that, kind of really, I don't want to say revolutionized Star Wars, but, really some of the top best stories of Star Wars. And it was in it. And finishing it up, I actually quite enjoyed it. As always, I always, listen to the ones that Mark Thompson does the voices for because he's just phenomenal in all his Star Wars Audible items that he does. But what's interesting in this time full, guys, obviously, Nathan, you haven't, read it or done much with it, I'm sure. And then Scott, you said you read like the first chapter or two.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's, and you might've got a little bit of this, but they've really explained it a lot better later on. So in the initial High Republic era, which is 232 BBY, so 232 years before the Battle of Yavin, there is actually no easy way for a ship to just go into hyperspeed. They can't just do what they do in putting in their coordinates and jumping off. They actually have to use this basically highway a hyperspeed lane system, kind of like if you guys probably haven't seen it, but it's something similar like Cowboy Bebop did in their anime style, where you have these gates and you basically pay a tax fee, an entry fee gateway to use this hyperspeed lane. And it has predetermined spots of where you basically get off into these certain spots. And then you basically have to travel the rest of the way in normal space. Okay. So there's really, like I said, kind of a unique way system that the Coruscant, then the inner planets, the mid rim, and then the outer rim is set up in the way they're doing this. And then what the villains that they introduce in this time are called the Nihil, and they, for whatever reason, which I haven't gotten an opportunity to explore yet. I'm sure it'll explore later of how they're actually doing it, other than this one kind of prophet-sized person who can like chart the stars, like understanding hyperspeed. I don't want to do too much spoiler alert here for you guys, but basically the Nihil have that capability to then travel their own way through hyperspace, right? And they're obviously makes them very powerful in this time frame because they can interrupt, they can jump into it, they can even go hyperspeed to some degree. They call it the paths, but they can literally jump like only like 10 meters through hyperspeed, and basically makes them very hard for ships to hit them, right? If they can literally just skip through and kind of like do this mini hyperspace jump, it's like almost kind of like trying to hit a this mosquito, or almost like a hummingbird, right? With an bow and arrow, right? When you're thinking about trying to hit them, they can even do kamikazes where they can literally just time warp them through, or not time warp them, but shoot them through the hyperspace into someone else's ship.
Are
right?
you
It's a little
telling
bit-
me they did the Holdo maneuver centuries before the Holdo maneuver?
Or actually, I was thinking, but not the kamikaze attack. But you were talking about the ability to like do the short jumps. I was thinking of the Picard maneuver from Star Trek, where the enemy is going to shoot where you were because you move so fast they can't track you. Or I was also thinking about skip tracing in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, when we see Poe Dameron doing that with the Falcon early on in that film. Which is basically a similar idea. I love that concept about the star gates, though, if you will, or jump gates, like from Babylon 5.
Yeah. So that's how they actually, travel is used, and why the Nihil, not being force sensitive people at this point, how they're able to really challenge the Jedi, right? Because it makes them, and then the High Republic, does have a militia, but nowhere near that what even the Grand Republic has. Specifically, you know, when the Grand Republic builds what they have for the Clone Wars, right, which is all part of Sidious's early plans, anyways. Because at this point, they really rely heavy on the Jedi to help dispute issues, right? They you know, and this is where we just mentioned earlier. You know, where the hubris of the Jedi are really, you know, starting to show. They're not too bad in what they're doing right now with at this point in the light of the Jedi storytelling, but they're definitely very, you know, high in their ways, but they're not to the level that we see even with Master Venestro, or definitely what we see in the Phantom Menace at this point with the Grand Republic. So that's just kind of outlining a little bit then, because if you jump then, which I did the calculation. So if this is 100 years before the Phantom Menace, which is 18 years before the Battle of Yavin, that'd be 118. That's 232. So it'd be about 115 years the Light of the Jedi takes place before approximately this one.
Hold on.
Since this says this is about 100 years before the series of the Phantom Menace.
No, I said 100 years before the Empire, so it's 100 years before Revenge of the Sith.
That's
that
different
right?
than what we were reading. It said
I thought they
100.
specifically said 100 years before the Menace.
Either way, I mean, we're talking 18 years different at this point with that logic. But anyway,
100 years before the rise of the Empire. It is a time of peace.
So
The Jedi.
either way,
But one of the trailers did say before the Menace.
so
Well, the trailers may have said that, but the episode itself says 100 years before the rise of the Empire.
I mean, you
So
could
that
say
would-
that the
well, so
Phantom
that would be
Menace is
literally-
the beginning of the rise of the Empire.
So yeah, so that would be, well, when's the rise of the Empire happen after between the Phantom Menace? That'd be 5 years, right? Phantom Menace and the rise of the Empire is still going to be 18 years, because that's when Luke and Leia are born.
The rise of the Empire would be in Revenge of the Sith, which would
Correct.
be
So
about
what's the difference between-
13 years.
That would be the formation of the Empire. One could make the case that Palpatine becoming Chancellor was the beginning of the rise of the Empire, as he slowly built up the Empire from that day.
I mean, you could make the case for a lot of things.
But all I'm asking, okay, so
Yes, I can.
To Qualm Nathan, what is the difference between the Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith? 5 years, 7 years, or would it? No,
No,
I guess it'd be
it's closer to
13
13.
13 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Anakin.
Yeah.
So if Anakin was 18 at Revenge of the Sith, is that what we're determining? Or would he have been older than that?
I'll double check the.
Either way. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, it's still approximately 100-ish or so years between the Light of the Jedi and this at this point. It's 100, 105, 108, whatever it might be. It's still about 100 years or 115 or something like that. So anyways, so at this point in time, when the Acolyte's taking place, they're obviously... I didn't feel like we got too much in the way of where the Jedi are, or I should say the non-Jedi or the rest of the society is really heavily relying on the Jedi. Everyone's used to the Jedi, but it definitely still felt more like the Phantom Menace. You know, where like people are just, okay, there's Jedis around and they're doing what they need to do, right? Unlike where the Light of the Jedi, where they really relied on the Jedi, like I said, to do a lot of the things that were, you know, outside of just what a little local town of somebody, you know, could handle in their issue. Anything large, medium, large scale, the Jedi had to be involved with it. So, but what I really liked about this, though, was that they still did a great job of really setting the scenery with everything and really kind of world building, which was nice because, you know, you get these nice aerial shots of the towns that they're in or the planets, you know, that they're visiting. You definitely got to see a bit more of the scenery. So, you know, overall, like I said, like I said, you really kind of felt like that was part of the Star Wars galaxy. But it definitely is different from where the Light of the Jedi takes place, because obviously at this point, the Nihil aren't like mentioned, right? You would imagine that something would have been called out if they had to deal with the Nihil, as well as dealing with this Jedi assassin. You know, you're obviously kind of getting the earlier inclinations of some type of dark force users, right? Whether they are the Sith or not, still be determined. But at this point, you are getting something. I was actually going to say, when Nathan, you commented about the Force ninjas, I mean, definitely this feels very Asajj Ventress to me, where she's
true,
the
yeah.
trained assassin under the apprentice or under the master that we don't know yet, right? So is this just a Dooku training Asajj, right, to then overthrow the master at some point, maybe, or is it like what Vader did with, once the Empire had, dismantled, or I'm sorry, was formed and dismantled the Jedi, then Vader did all these Inquisitors, right, which were never really truly apprentices. They were just assassins, right? So is this where we're getting that more early inclination of what those roles are? Because to be fair, we do know that prior to the Phantom Menace, the Sith haven't appeared for over 1,000 years, right? Because I talked about this. This is what Ki-Adi-Mundi talks about in the Council, that the Sith haven't been around for more than a millennium. So, now, is that just what he's aware of, and Yoda's in secrecy has these data files somewhere, right? Like, oh no, we've been killing Sith many times over these past 1,000 years or so
It's
since
just
we
all
last publicized
right.
what was known,
It's all
right?
hush, baby.
The Sith that we haven't killed haven't been around for 1,000 years.
Yeah,
Right.
If you haven't killed them, how did you know that they were there? Easy.
who knows?
Our logic is flawless.
Yes.
Semantics. What we say is true
So-
from a certain point of view.
But like I said, I really enjoy this because it still is very prosperous. You still have some towns that, like the one that they're visiting, where Master Torben's at, didn't feel like some glamorous Coruscant, right? Like we obviously see Coruscant still early. It's very, that there's obviously this town where people aren't bad, but they're not obviously living the high life. But it seemed like simple farmers or miners in a lot of aspects. So, but anyways, no, like I said, I feel like so far they've done a good job of setting up something that in Star Wars, sometimes you have to be careful, right? When they're doing prequels, sequels, time jumps, especially like when Star Trek we complain about, right? Because you had the original series with such gimmicky props, and then Next Generation comes out and it's like, well, that's 100 plus years later, so yeah, the technology is supposed to look better, right? And then Deep Space Nine, Voyager come out pretty much right in unison, but then you go to Enterprise, which was supposed to be several hundred years, and the technology looked better, right? I get it, right? But at least here it didn't feel like that technology really like even appeared to be better than what we would be used to from the Phantom Menace, or even during the Empire era.
Yeah, well, as I always say about technology in Star Wars, first of all, Star Trek is digital, Star Wars is analog, so that's always going to be a big divide. But Star Wars is very tactile, knobby, buttons, blinky lights, that kind of deal. But also, I mean, like we say all the time, the universe in Star Wars is lousy with super weapons. Governments last about 25 years before some giant super weapon shows up
Or another
and
government takes
obliterates
over.
them. And another government takes over after them. So, like, all these planets are getting blasted back to the Stone Age every two decades. You can't really make a lot of technological progress. And they don't have the internet because, as we know from the Bad Batch, when the lab where Dr. Hemlock was studying all this stuff about midichlorians and clones, when it got blown up by Omega and friends, that was it. His research was lost. And when the Imperial Archive over on Scarif got blown up in Rogue One, they lost a bunch of stuff about Project Stardust and this, that, and the other, the stolen data tapes, etc.
One of the cool things that they end up doing at the end of The Light of the Jedi is they set up this thing called the Starlight Beacon, which is basically this huge floating outpost, which you would think is just like the Space Federation outpost, right, that hovers over Earth in Star Trek. Looks very similar to it, but it's out in the outer rim, right? Because takes so long to travel there. So they're going to have like this station where it's going to have, a place for people to refugee if they need to. They can use it as a neutral site for if there's two quarrel planets or civil war amongst the planet. They can go there. The Jedi are going to be stationed there. They have hospitals, schools. They have a market, blah 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 type deal for people to live on, and this whole like trade opportunity, right? But then the big thing they said is the way the metal is outlined around it is that it will be able to be a giant communication center so that people, at least communication wise, they can use it to get better communication out to the outer rim. Because to your point, Scott, it's like, yeah, we have cell phones today, right? But try sending cell phones through space, right? It doesn't work, or
Only
it's going to
Doctor
take
Who can
very
pull that
long
off.
to get there. And that's if it even gets to the right target where it's supposed to go, right? Because you got to send that radio frequency somewhere, right? The frequency.
Oh, man.
So
Come on,
that's going to be doing it.
Let's talk about NASA and how awesome those guys really are, because they were able to reestablish communications with one of the Voyager satellites that was launched before I was born. And, you know, I'm the oldest person on this show, and often
Not
these
by
days
much,
when I'm
but
in
yes.
no, but still, and some days, these days when I hang out with other geeks, I'm the oldest person in the room. Anyway, the point is, the NASA was able to reestablish radio communication with the Voyager probe, and it was like literally astronomical odds that they'd be able to pull that off. But the Star Wars galaxy, we don't have that kind of long-range communication, and even Obi-Wan runs into a problem with the HoloNet because in Attack of the Clones, when he can't get a message through when he's on Geonosis, right? And they lose contact with them all the time. You know, here and there, there's some sort of satellite problem, etc. The point is that technology within the Star Wars galaxy should never be compared to Star Trek type technology. Even the stuff that Captain Kirk and them were doing in the original series in the 1960s would be miraculous levels of technology to any average Star Wars character from almost any era that we've seen so far. But the idea about Starlight Beacon really reminds me of the Astronomicon in Warhammer 40,000, the beacon of psychic energy that the Emperor of Mankind always broadcasts from Holy Terra, Earth itself, so that ships that are part of the Imperium can find their way around the galaxy by using it as a point of reference. In fact, there's a huge part of the current Warhammer 40k lore where there has been a giant warp storm that cut off half the galaxy from the Astronomicon, and all of the humans on the other side of the maledictrous... some Warhammer nerd is throwing popcorn at his podcast right now because I'm crushing mangling
It's
the
Matthew.
pronunciation. Yes, Matthew is. Yes, my son is yelling at me, Dad. How could you? Anyway, so yes, the maledictrous.
He's getting a nasty text right now.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's cut off the half of the Imperium, and so the Emperor's light is no longer visible. So it would sort of be like if something blows up Starlight Beacon and people have started using it as a point of navigation. They can't see the lighthouse, baby. Where is the lighthouse? You know. So that's a really cool idea in the Star Wars galaxy and always needed because, you know, we keep blowing ourselves back to the Stone Age technology.
So it'll be interesting to see later as they storytell if they haven't already, like, how does it get blown up, or is that what the Nihil deal with, right? Because, like, how do they deal with that? Because later, as we're dealing with the Skywalker saga, there isn't one. So,
all right, my phone literally just lit up a Warhammer group text. I'm not going to read it because I'm busy, but that'll be hilarious.
using their psychic.
Yes. Anyway, okay, so I think, did we all do our
I think we did
stuff,
questions
or-
good
Yes,
enough.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, good, cool. All right, question number 4. Take it away, Derrick.
So we've talked a little bit about it, right? So the whole point of May hunting down the 4 Jedi. What do we think the Jedi are hiding about Brendok, where May and Osha were born? Where, you know, at this point it's been 16 years, they said, because you know, there was 8 years after that where Osha trained with Sol and the Jedi, and then 8 years since she left that portion of the Jedi Order. So 16 years since that happened. Again, we assumed, or at least the Jedi are presumed, that May is dead. But what happens that May is now coming to hunt them down? And to May's point, May thought Osha was dead. So who told May that Osha was dead?
That's a great question. I think I'll jump in and answer this first here. First of all, the main question of what are the Jedi hiding about Brendok? So we know there was a fire. We know lots of people died. Several were presumed dead. I think, one, the Jedi started the fire. For some reason, they willingly or unknowingly caused the disaster. specifically those 4 Jedi: Master Indara, Master Torben, Master Kelnaka, and Master Saul. Which is why those are the 4 people that May is like, checking them off her list, like Steve Buscemi and Happy Gilmore. And so they are the people that she wants to kill because they killed her family, or so she thought. Now, I think the reason that the Jedi started the fire, or the fire was a terrible catastrophe related to, they were trying to stop a group of Force witches in some way. We know that Osha and May had 2 mothers, because there was dialogue about that in these 2 episodes. And I think that in some manner, they are like the Witches of Dathomir or some other type of Force witch, which have been around since the 1980s in Star Wars movies, before anybody starts moaning and complaining about it. I think that those Force users were somehow going against what the Jedi thought was proper and orthodox, and they, either by accident or by purpose, wanted to eliminate them, and the fire broke out as a result and killed so many innocent people. The thing that the Jedi are hiding about Brendock is that they were at fault. And the larger question you had about who told May that Osha was dead and who told Osha that May was dead, well, Master Saul told Osha that her sister was dead. Whereas on the other side, whoever our dark side user is the one that told May that Osha was dead. So we've had a Jedi lie to one twin, and we've had the Darksider lie to the other twin. And I think that as a result of that, both twins are finally going to come together and realize that they don't want to support either one of those things. And so they will, turn against both of their former masters, and then they'll go back to the Force Witch version of the Force. And so their interaction with the living Force will now take the form of a third way. I am the Bindu, the one in the middle. I think that's actually what we will see here, and it'll be Force witches that basically serve the Bindu, as opposed to serving the Bogan or the Ashra. Help me out, Nathan. Bogan, Ashra? Is that right?
Gosh, it's been a little while since I watched that.
Anyway, you get what I'm saying, though.
The light and the dark.
Yes, the light, the dark, the one in the middle. All right, so we're going to be all about, Tom Baker, and we're going to have Force witches that serve the Bindu. So that's my answer to question 4. Nathan?
I think you're wrong. Just totally wrong.
Very possible.
Except for
Completely
one thing.
Possible.
I think the Jedi are going to do their best Billy Joel impression and say, we didn't start the fire. But actually, I think
it's been always burning since the world was
always
been burning.
Yeah.
Since Brendock's been turning.
But I think that they actually did start the fire, probably accidentally. But I don't think we're going to get the witches. I don't think we're going to get the serving the one in the middle. I think we just won't go that route
Totally
at all.
Possible.
Yeah. But I do think they will have tried to stop some smugglers or something, and will have started the fire by accident. And, of course, each twin will blame the other side for what happened. So Osha will eventually blame the Darksider, for lack of a better term, since we don't know if they're Sith or not.
Yeah.
And of course, May is blaming the Jedi. But the truth will be what both of them started it.
Yeah.
Somehow they both will bear some culpability, but the Jedi will at least admit it. At least Torben will. Of course, he'll die to do it, but he admits it in the end.
Yeah. More Gullet will know the truth.
The one crazy possibility that I thought, and I think this probably isn't going to happen, but I'm going to throw it out there just so that if it does, then I get to say that, aha, see, I called it. Triplets. There was a third child who did die in the fire, so each one of the surviving ones thinks that it was their twin who died.
Fascinating. All right, Derrick.
Just make it super soap opera.
Yeah.
Can I
Derrick,
present this?
What are the Jedi?
Here, let me see if I can share a screen. Sharing screen. Don't show these tips. Will it allow?
I need
Here
the
we
little old school TV test pattern to throw up right now. Please
Here we
stand
go.
by.
Share it. Are you seeing it?
Oh,
Nope.
okay.
Oh,
Boom.
yes.
This. Yep. All right. Anastasia.
So this is from the preview, if you guys remember the trailer. So I'm not spoiling anything.
Right.
So I think this is where Scott's right. This
Ooh.
is a witch.
Okay.
This is potentially their mother.
Or one of their mothers.
Or one of the mothers, yes. So
Yeah, but see, the quote here, this isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it. Generally, if you're talking like that, you're on the bad side.
Oh, for
yes
sure.
and no, because and I'll just
No. Just
get back
yes.
to seeing you
Just
guys.
yes.
No, because this is the thing we've talked about. The Jedi, or the and the Sith believe in two different religions to some degree about the Force, but there's always more religions than what's out there. So why is it that the Jedi can tell me I can only use the Force in this way? Right? Or no matter what, if you're not using the Force for the Jedi good way, then you're a Sith. Well, why does it have to be like that? That's the question I read it like. It's not about this two-party system that we love to have in our real world, two-party system. There
I don't
can
know if
be
I
a
love
third.
to have it.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's not bad to abuse power?
But who says this is abusing power?
If somebody is all, oh, this isn't about good or bad, it's about power and who's allowed to use it. They're looking to abuse
the Force.
power.
The Force is power. Let's be honest, right? I mean, the thing about the Night Sisters is that they gave everyone the bill. At least we don't know, but the Night Sisters used the power. Whatever you want to call it, the power, the Force. You want to call it, God. You want to call it Buddha. You want to call it whatever. It's what your belief is, right? So we don't know if that's what she's referring to, is that the belief of this almighty oracle is what they call the power, right? We don't know, because what do the witches of the Night Sisters call it? Do they call it the Force? I don't believe they do.
They call it magic.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But also, they're evil.
But we find
Well, some
out
of
from
them
the
are.
Night Sisters that, yes, in the mountain, those witches weren't evil that we found, right? That Morgan Elsbeth led to it, right?
Yeah,
So
but-
I'm not saying that this person
so they're
isn't
good.
necessarily evil. I'm not denying you to that point that this person couldn't be evil in some aspects. But what she's saying is right, though. Who has the right to tell me what's good and what's bad? Right now, we all believe in some moral compass, right? We believe in, but everything should be free will, right? I mean, that's what we believe with everything, right? Unfortunately, some people want to use it for bad, but majority of people want to use it for good. Most people just want to live, right? Do all the things that they want to do. But that's where I agree. I feel that this is where the Jedi, as being as cocky as they are, go out, find these people and say, no, you can only use the Force this way. This is the only way you can use magic this way. It has to be through the Jedi Order, otherwise you're against us, right?
No, being on the light side is not the same thing as being a Jedi. One might say it is to say that if the Jedi die, the light dies, is vanity. You can be light side and not be a Jedi, but if you stray from the light, then you go to the dark. Like,
This is sort of like when people were talking about the concept of gray Jedi, and Filoni said there's no such thing as gray Jedi, because they're not Jedi when they're in that segment of the Force. They're something else.
Correct, but if they're using the Force, whether for light or dark or whatever, but they're using it their own way, and the Jedi don't like it using it that way, they're going to tell you you're wrong. And you shouldn't tell them.
They will come down on you and be like, you need to either stop using the Force or you need to let this kid come with us to the Jedi Temple.
Correct.
Because if we leave them alone, they'll turn into a killer. Or
they're gonna turn out bad regardless, and that's not always the case, right? Again, that's where the Jedi are showing where it's our way or the highway, no matter what. To your point, Nathan, right? Whether you want to be good or bad, it's with the Jedi, it's our way or no way. Either you're with us or you're against us.
Yeah, okay. The Jedi Order does have a lot of hubris in that regard. And at least they did in the prequels, and now we're seeing that they probably do in this era as well.
As well as the
But-
Old Republic, if we're going to be talking about the video game, there's a whole lot of this kid needs to go to the Jedi Temple, or
Well, and not just that, it's
but-
it's
but-
the way the Republic
but-
is too.
But my point is, the reason gray Jedi don't exist is because the gray really doesn't exist except for Bendu himself.
oh, really? So you don't think he can have adherence to his way?
I think Bendu is the only one who actually exists in the middle. That
So- There a whole
race of
everybody
them?
else is either light or dark, and when you stray from the light, you go to the dark.
So Zeb and his crew that like had a group that was like, we follow Bendu, like they weren't really doing that. The dark side was deceiving them, which is entirely possible. The dark side loves to deceive people.
I will disagree because BioWare told me I can be in the middle because I can do one event where I'm picking good and one event where I'm bad, and my meter is always in the middle.
I put way more stock in Dave Filoni and George Lucas, who both very much have the stance of there's light and there is dark, and
Sure,
darkness
but I mean,
is being corrupted.
I thought
But it's
that
all
what Dave was trying
perception,
to
though.
say
Who's to
was
say that the Jedi or the light is the right way? I mean, yes, we all agree that morally they should be doing it.
But again, for the third time, I am not saying that the Jedi are the light. I quoted Luke explicitly stating that they are
the light
not
exists independent
the
of the
light.
Jedi.
The light,
Yeah.
the Jedi is an order, and they can be on the light side, but they are not the be all and end all of being the light. Like Ahsoka, when she leaves the Jedi Order, doesn't leave the light; she leaves the Jedi, but she doesn't go to gray or the dark.
Correct. I'm not arguing with you on that bit. But that's what the quote is saying. It's saying this isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who's allowed to use it. That's what the point of the
and
quote.
what I'm saying is, if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, this isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who's allowed to use it," they're probably on the bad side, and they're trying to get you to think that it's not about good and bad.
Totally. But also, isn't there a possibility that some particular unjust law is holding them down, and they should be allowed to do what they know how to do?
Yeah, then they should be saying this is about good and bad, and that is bad.
Okay, all right, cool.
I mean,
Now,
like I said-
I thought that Filoni said that about there's no such thing as gray Jedi because once you become gray, you're no longer Jedi.
No.
Not that there's no such thing as gray. I'll need to get some more clarification on that if you have some sources. You can tell me later. You don't have to tell me right now.
Okay.
But I thought the whole point was if you're gray, you're definitely not a Jedi.
You know what? I can put together a whole podcast about it. We can do that as an episode.
Who would
But
even do
regardless,
that?
that's again to your point. But again, anyone can write a story, and still it can happen in Star Wars at this point. Again, let's not pigeonhole ourselves in there or the writers in there. We want good story, right? So as long as we get good storytelling, that's what we want. But anyways, that's where I'm agreeing with Scott on this point. When it is a third party that isn't Jedi or Sith, we'll call it party, right? Because I don't know if they're good or bad to appease Nathan's point, but they're a third party, and basically the Jedi are saying. But again, they could be bad. Doesn't mean they're Sith, though. Is all I'm saying.
Correct. And being good doesn't mean that they're Jedi.
Correct. So, but all I'm saying, but in this world, you're either Jedi or you're not. That's what I'm saying. Because the Jedi are with the political power, and that's the point of the Republic we talked about, right? The Republic forces people to basically, this is what we're happening in the real world today. Why is the Union not helping Israel, whether you believe in it or not? Because, right, or helping all the other, I'm not Israel, Ukraine. Why were they not helping the Ukraine? Because they weren't part of the UN. But you're still going to let Russia go in and devastate them and blow them up.
Well,
and not,
to be correct, Ukraine is part of the United Nations.
Okay.
They are not part of NATO. But
NATO,
I get what
thank
your
you.
point
Thank
is.
you.
How come
Thank you.
NATO isn't helping them? Because clearly
Correct.
that's
Sorry,
the right
thank
thing
you.
to do. But sometimes the Jedi are in the same position. They're like, how come the Jedi aren't helping these people? Clearly it's the
Because they're
right
not
and
part of the
moral thing to
Republic.
do. And the answer is, right, exactly, we can't be in charge. It's like
We didn't
Blue
actually
Carson.
come here to rescue slaves.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
Qui-Gon
but at the end of
Jinn,
the
I
day,
didn't
isn't that
come
what
here
the
to free
Jedi are
slaves.
supposed to do, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that,
Blue Carson
that's
in the new
point
era
here.
with the Mandalorian. Blue is out there and he's all like, I can't actually do all these things. And then, he goes back to the New Republic and is like, we need your help. And they're like, we can't do it. We don't have the resources. It's not worth it. It's like, never mind that it's the morally correct thing to do to help oppose the, Moff Gideon and all those guys. We don't have the resources and they're not even part of the Republic.
It's about who has power, who has the power and can use it. And that's where it becomes political then. Or religious, whatever you want to viewpoint it. It's who has the power then and then who's allowed to use it to that sense of whether it's good or bad. Most of the time, yes, we would agree that, when it's bad, we want to help people, right? But we're the ones with the power. The people that are suffering don't have the power, right? They're not able to do it on their own. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the trouble. So why aren't we helping them, right? Well, So anyways, that's where I feel that, yes, we're gonna see this because I feel like that is the way then that it'll help tie that as you'll start to see the downfall of the Jedi and why at some point 100 some years later, whatever we determine between what's the rise of the Empire or not is when we actually get
segment of time.
Revenge of the Sith.
I did look this up. It's 13 years between the Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith. Phantom Menace is 32 before Battle of Yavin. Revenge of the Sith is 19. So that's
Rise of the Sith. No, wait. Revenge of Skywalker. No.
Revenge of the Jedi. Blue Harvest.
Rey Strikes Back. What?
All right. Question number 5.
This is what we love about it, guys. This is what we love. This
Exactly.
is a good conversation.
Question number 5. Who is the Sith, and are they a Sith, that is pulling May's strings? I'm going to go real quick because I think my answer is correct and just very, very plain. It's Kamir, the guy who was selling May the poison. He is the guy who is leading her on, and he wears the mask when he's being Mr. Red Lightsaber of Doom, and then he doesn't when he's being Mr. I'm not Ezra Miller, but man, do I look like Ezra Miller. So there you go. That's my answer. It's Kimir, and he is using the whole thing to make her into the perfect assassin so that he can use it to increase his own personal power. And obviously it's not going to work because, as we've discussed, you don't hear about this segment of the thing in The Phantom Menace where Hiari and them are all like, we haven't had Sith in forever. I mean, maybe they're not Sith, but I feel like they are, and it's just going to be one of these things where they have to cover it up. And the cover-up is related to that whole, the Jedi started the fire on Brindok. Nathan?
I saw that theory on Threads that it is Khmer. I will give a shout out to Darth Gallote because that's the person that I saw say this on Threads. Apparently has an Xbox podcast, so you can go check that out if you want. I know nothing about it, but I did see that theory on Threads, so I'm not going to claim that it was me who came up with it. But one thing I like about the theory that Khmer is the big bad guy is he says the first line of the Sith code. There is no peace. Peace is a lie. So he knows something about the Sith. Either that or he got very, very lucky.
And so does May, because doesn't she reply with a piece of the code?
Yeah, so there's some connection there. If he's not the Sith, and I'm going to say the Sith because I do think it is the Sith. If he's not the Sith, he's also being manipulated by.
And if it's not Sith, they kind of hit us over the head with it to really throw us off by having him quote the Sith code like that.
Yeah,
and her echo, her call and response.
Yep. So I'm keeping a close eye on Khmer. I think that is correct. If it's not Khmer, then I think it's somebody that Sol knew back when he was. Maybe not a youngling, but a knight, not a master.
Someone who fallen Jedi.
So somebody that he might even, maybe even somebody that he thought was lost on Brindok.
Again, he was like, well, I thought you were dead. I'm really bad at determining who's dead.
Hold on. I saw you die. No, I just fell over. I thought if humans fell over, they were dead.
All
Did you check
Okay.
for a pulse? No. Is that
A
important?
what? A what now? All
Yeah,
right,
that's
Derrick,
my wrist open. You don't have any major arteries there. Of course not.
what do you think? I'm stupid or something? Anyway, Derrick, question 5. Who is the Sith and pulling May's strings?
So I actually want to say, I almost wanted to put it. It's Krendar or whatever. Am I saying his name right? Krendar. Your guy. You're saying the apothecary.
Yeah, the apothecary.
Kamir. I think it's
Kamir.
Kamir. Qimir. It's not
Kamir.
pronounceable in English, but you know.
Okay, sorry. But I actually think that the person that has the Sith lightsaber killed someone who had it. I don't think they're actually the person that did it. Because you can kill a Sith. You can't kill a Jedi, but you can kill a Sith. So
I wish that were true.
Just yes. Oh yeah. Well, obviously we see that within the first 5 minutes. You can kill a Jedi. So
Yes, exactly. You can kill if you're May. Apparently, you can kill multiple Jedi. You're racking up a pretty big. She's gaining a lot of XP, leveling up quickly here.
Yes. She keeps picking that the Sith way though, so her meter keeps going down.
Yes.
So, no, I think what'll end up happening here are because you guys have already kind of alluded to it. So what are we thinking for predictions here at the end of the series, the season here? Because I'm thinking what's actually going to happen is that this story is about Osha. So I think what's going to happen is the Jedi are going to kill May, and that's what's going to turn Osha to the dark side, and that's what season 2 is going to be. That'll be the uncovering.
I think that. We'll go ahead and do some post predictions here. I think, first of all, it's way too early for us to predict things about season 2. But secondly,
but when has that ever stopped us?
When has that ever stopped us? Exactly, never. The answer is never. I think that what will happen, because this is Star Wars, redemption means death. May will realize that she did the wrong thing, but Osha will have reached the point where she's furious with the Jedi. And the Jedi are about to kill Osha. May will make the sacrifice play once she goes back to the light. She'll die in her sister's arms, and her sister will be all, "You're right, I definitely should not hold this grudge against the Jedi Order, but I don't really want to be a part of it either, so I'm going to stay on the light side, but disassociate myself from the Jedi Order even further and just go out into the Outer Rim and not be part of galactic civilization."
So is she not part of season 2?
But in season 2, something will happen that only she can solve. And some poor Jedi, maybe even a person who was a Padawan during season 1, gets tasked with going to find her to bring her back to solve the problem. I'm hoping it's Jackie, the girl with the pink eyes and the spiky hair, whose race
X-23?
is absolutely... Yes, X-23.
Yeah.
Her. I hope that she is the one who, at this point in time now, actually a Jedi Knight, has to go and find Osha in season 2 to be like, "We need your help against the," I don't know, fill in the blank here.
She is kind of the brains behind the
I think those two will be
group
fighting in season 2.
with
That's possible too.
she's
Maybe
kind
they
of,
have a fight. Yeah, maybe they have a fight when she goes to find her, and she's all like, "You have to help." But before she can even talk, Osha is all like, "Not again!" And they go at it.
Well, Osha's going to be the one that has to kill Saul.
Maybe
That's
so.
how they finish Trial 4.
Maybe
Because
so.
this is the trials in this season.
This is the Sith version of the trials, is killing 4 Jedi Masters.
Well,
I guess it really is, because I'm just going to call him Darth Kamir. Didn't Darth Kamir say something like,
"There's 4 trials.
You got to kill 4 Jedi Masters, and one of them you got to kill with no weapons."
Yeah, and that's what she said. She's like, "But don't tell the Master that it's going to be it." But he's not going to accept that. And what's going to happen is May is going to sacrifice herself. So that way, like you said, but Saul has to do it. And so Osha is going to be pissed off. And so she's going to kill Saul. So that's how May doesn't die until the last second after Saul's dead. But that's how May passes Trial 4. She gets her twin sister to kill Saul. Because she didn't kill him with a weapon then. She made someone else do it.
Ooh. And manipulation is quite the Sith tool. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's a cool idea. I hope you're right about
But that's Osha's then turn to the dark side.
Yeah.
Because she'll corrupt her, see that and show the Jedi to her point that we talked about is very, manipulative in themselves and don't follow the light.
Well, some of them definitely don't follow the light, for sure. Anyway, Nathan, prediction for...
I'm going to go back to my York prediction. I'm going to say that Yorg is the one who ends up killing Darth Kimir, and in doing so, snaps and becomes the new Sith apprentice, the new acolyte for some bigger bad
Plagueis?
Darth.
Plagueis?
It could be Darth Plagueis.
It
It's
could easily
close enough.
be a case of like the Grand Inquisitor in Star Wars Rebels Season 1. When you kill him, he's all like, you have no idea what you have unleashed. So Darth Kimir dies, but he's all like, well, now that I'm dead, here comes the real big bad.
Yeah, and then
Or is
York,
Yord the one that May was working with? And he's living a double life.
I don't think he's living a double life
Okay.
at this point, but I think he kills Darth Kimir. That makes him snap and go to the dark side. The timing could be right for him to actually become Darth Plagueis.
The Paladin becomes the Death Knight?
Yeah,
Oh,
could
boom.
be.
Come on, it writes itself. All right. Okay, cool. Well, whatever those happen, you can guarantee yourself we're going to discuss it. But first, we're going to take a break to hear about the other shows here on the FPN. And when we come back, we're going to take a little bit of a Star Wars gaming interlude, not just limited to video games, but also tabletop games. So stick around after the break.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blood of Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kevin. We hope you guys will check out some of those shows. So real quick, we're going to take a little bit of a Star Wars gaming interlude. This week, one of the projects that one of my friends has been working on for quite a while finally released video game-wise on Apple iOS, Android, and the Nintendo Switch. It is an arena battler, almost like Overwatch kind of thing, where you are in the Star Wars galaxy as hunters, fighting against other teams of hunters, and you've got classic Star Wars character archetypes that are playable as characters, but they are also the classic squad-based first-person shooter combat roles like tank, support, and DPS. And in this case, one of the characters that you can unlock is named Sentinel, and he is an old-school Galactic Empire stormtrooper that has a massive E-Web blaster he carries around with him in very classic tank format of, I'm a beefy guy with a big weapon, and he just blows people up with his essentially Star Wars chain gun, as the case may be. And he has the big E-Web blaster that is a heavy repeating blaster connected to a power pack in his backpack. And he is described as an Imperial heavy gunner. Guys, I know you haven't had time to really check out this game, but if you've ever played Overwatch or watched somebody play that, it very much plays in the same way, except that it is on iOS and Android and Nintendo Switch instead of PC and the other systems. I have played as Sentinel, so I found this really cool article about Star Wars Hunters, how to play as Sentinel from our friends at GameRant.com. And he basically talks a lot about how Sentinel is a beefy tank, but he does not have any self-healing abilities. Instead, he has a combat shield, which is almost like the personal shield that we see Katie Sackhoff use as in The Mandalorian, and we see sometimes Din Djarin uses one, and occasionally we see it being used in Star Wars The Clone Wars by other Mandalorians, like, Nathan, who was that Mandalorian guy that was in charge of the dudes that all had helmets that looked like Darth Maul's with spikes?
Pre Vizsla?
Pre Vizsla, but also Gar Saxon.
Gar
That's
Saxon,
the guy
okay.
I'm trying to think of. We've seen Gar Saxon use
But
that.
both of those work.
It's true. Yeah, we've seen them all use that personal shield kind of thing. And then we saw Gar Saxon use his in a duel against Bo-Katan. And, of course, we've seen Din Djarin use one, I believe, as well. Anyway, Sentinel has one of those, but it projects from the barrel of his E-Web, so you can keep it out in front of you and still blast at the enemy. So there's no self-healing here for those of you who play Overwatch, but what you can do is set up that shield to absorb up to, like, 230 points worth of damage. So it's kind of like giving yourself, to put it in Dungeons & Dragons terms, you give yourself some temporary hit points instead of actual healing. And then his other two useful utility abilities are a suppressing shot, which allows you to stun and knock down a bunch of enemies at range. And then he's really about range, but if a lightsaber or vibro knife character gets up close to you, he does have the barrel slam attack, where he classically takes the gun, grabs it like a club and smacks you with it. Yes, and so you can use that not just to knock people down and back so that you can start blasting again, but if you're on a ledge, because there are ledges and you can fall in this game and take fall damage, you can barrel slam somebody off the side of the building and they'll take some damage when they hit the ground and might even die. And then, just like in Overwatch, everybody has an ultimate effect that they build up over time and then they can finally deploy it. His is one of my favorite things in all video games, especially in a Star Wars video game. You get to the ultimate, which is called Empire's Finest. So rather than have one stormtrooper attack, why not 3? So you hit the ultimate and 2 other members of your squad show up and start shooting at the enemy as autonomous little minions that you basically summon. But they come down with their jetpacks, and somewhere out there Finn goes, "They fly now?" And, then they start shooting.
They've been flying for decades, man.
Yeah, as seen here in the Galactic Civil War era. And these are all classic GCW stormtroopers. So the big round ventilation on their helmets and actually Sentinel himself has the really dirty, gritty, beaten up, almost Tatooine Sandtrooper-esque armor with the pauldron and the big backpack and the E-Web blaster. So yeah, if you guys haven't had a chance, check out Star Wars Hunters. It is free on the App Store for iOS and Android. I haven't looked to see if it's free on Nintendo Switch.
It's free on Switch. Yeah, it's free to do the digital download, but you can buy everything. It's microtransactions.
Yes, absolute microtransactions.
But you can buy the $15 Bounty Hunter pack, or whatever they call it. I don't know what you get with it, but yeah, it's free on Switch.
You unlock some characters, and then a bunch of the other unlocks that I've seen that you can purchase for microtransactions are cosmetics, kind of like Fortnite and Overwatch. And yeah. But yeah, if you like that kind of a squad-based thing, it was a little hard for me to learn how to do a shooter on iPhone because there isn't a trigger. You start shooting as soon as you get the enemy in your targeting reticule. So you just aim the gun in the right direction, and Sentinel, or whoever you are, takes over and just starts blasting. And because this is an E-Web, I mean, I was melting people in the first few seconds. I'm like, I'm going to play as this dude. And plus, as a tank with the shield, I'm an old man, so my reflexes aren't what they were. Some Jawa would be blasting me from the right side, and the thing was all like, "You're taking damage." I'm like, "What? How is this even?" So I'd turn on the shield, slowly turn my way around because I'm such, old tank guy. And I'm like, "Well, I'm going to kill you before you can finish killing me, Mr. Jawa, because I have a bunch of health. And then I'm going to run over here next to my support buddy or pick up this med pack power up, and I'll be fine." And at one point, I finished a match 890 points ahead of anybody else. Not at 890, 890 margin. Okay,
Wow.
It was redonkulous. I'm like, well, this guy is awesome. So anyway, if you like playing as a tank in any particular online game of squads, and you like Star Wars, and you like Stormtroopers, go play Sentinel. You'll have a blast. Doesn't cost you a dime. And big thanks to my friend Johnny Oso for helping to develop this. Johnny used to work for BioWare. He worked on the Old Republic. After he left BioWare, he got hired by Zynga, the company that's famous for making Farmville. And this was the game that he's been working on. So I'm like, dude, you're making video games and you've become like a Star Wars video game specialist. They hired him to do a Star Wars game. Not just to do a game, to do a Star Wars game. I'm like, you are living the dream, bro. You are living the dream. And the game's a lot of fun. So thank you very much, John.
Cool.
Yeah, and then speaking of people living the dream, Nathan, there's an update for our friend Caleb Grace, who has designed the Star
Absolutely.
Wars deck building game.
Yes. So the other day, I was riding in the car with Andrea, and I mentioned, she mentioned that we haven't played the Star Wars deck building game in a little while, and she wanted to play that. I said, well, that's cool, but I really wish that they had come out with a Clone Wars version of it. I just always wanted to see that. I figured that was the next logical extension. Literally, the next day, I see Caleb Grace post on Facebook, "Hey, guess what? We're making a Clone Wars version of the Star Wars deck building game." Like, someone has read my mind. This is excellent. So we are getting a Clone Wars version of the Star Wars deck building game made by Caleb Grace with Frank Brooks. I'm not very familiar with Frank Brooks, but we have talked with Caleb Grace on this very podcast before. Link somewhere. We should provide a link to that one. But regardless, we'd love to have you back, Caleb, by the way. This new game uses the same mechanics as the previous version, but the cards are all new. They're all Clone Wars era based, and you have the Separatists versus the Republic instead of the Empire versus the Rebels. Now, several of the cards will seem very familiar. For example, the cards that start in your deck are pretty much the same as the cards that start in your deck in the previous version of the game, just reflavored to be droid troopers and clone troopers instead of stormtroopers and rebel troopers. But the rest of the cards, new, different. They don't play the exact same way. Same mechanics, different cards. There's one in particular that I would like to highlight, and that is Jar Jar Binks, because I absolutely love what they have done with Jar Jar Binks. So he cost 0 to buy from the middle row, but you don't actually want him in your deck. He's bad. He doesn't do anything for you. But when you purchase him, you can spend 2 resources to gain 1 force, so the balance of the force comes back to your side by 1, and place him in your opponent's discard pile. So on some later turn, they're going to draw Jar Jar, and they're going to be like, "Man, I don't want Jar Jar. He doesn't help me at all." But then they can play him and spend 2 resources to gain 1 force and put him in your discard pile.
Tag, you're it.
Exactly. Like, we don't want Jar Jar. Here, you have Jar Jar. No, I don't want Jar Jar. You take Jar Jar.
But it sounds like to me, all Jar Jar does is really just spend 2 to get 1 force, and that's not a bad thing.
That's true. That is a
actually
useful
not,
effect.
But then you have to give him to your opponent.
Well, then you have to give it to your opponent. So if you just hold on to him right at the end when you need that 1 more force, he could win you the game.
You okay? We have seen several other cards. We have Obi-Wan Kenobi and Aayla Secura for the Republic. So we've got a Jedi theme going on there too, as well as some other troopers like an AT-RT and a Bark trooper. Those both have the trooper keyword. even though they're troopers on vehicles. They still count as troopers. For the Separatists, we have the likes of General Grievous and Newt Gunray. So not as much Sith going on as we have Jedi on the light side, so to speak. But I presume that we will have Count Dooku in there as well, and we just haven't seen him yet.
Grievous.
Yes, we have Grievous. We know what he does. He cost 5. He has 5 attack. He has the officer keyword. And when General Grievous defeats a target in the Galaxy Row, you may exile a droid from your hand. And if you do, you receive the target's reward a second time. So, of course, in this game, you get rewards for defeating your opponent's cards and when they're in the row, which is a very neat mechanic because it means that there are cards that only one player can get, but the other player can still interact with them. Grievous is very good at interacting with them. But, of course, he can't get Obi-Wan Kenobi, at least not by himself, because Obi-Wan Kenobi costs 6, and General Grievous only has 5 attack. So he needs some help to take down Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan has 4 attack, but also 2 force. So he brings the balance of the force back towards you. And when you reveal Obi-Wan from the top of your deck, add him to your hand and reveal the next card instead. So the Republic has a lot of mechanics that reveal the top card of the deck because the Jedi can kind of see the future. But the future's always in motion, so sometimes the top of your deck changes. So that's really cool. We also have Jango Fett. Jango Fett is a neutral card, so either side can hire the bounty hunter. You can send him to Camino to make clones, or you can send him to Geonosis to shoot her. He's also got 5 attack, and when he defeats a target in the Galaxy Row, and lots of bounty hunters get rewards for defeating targets in the Galaxy Row, you draw 1 card.
Naturally, of course, they do that well because the old school, I say old school now because we got 2 versions of the game, the old school terminology for that for dark side is bounty hunting. Mm-hmm. For light side, we call it sabotaging.
Right. And I believe they're keeping those terms, but Jango Fett is a bounty hunter that can work for either side. Yep. And speaking of people who work for either side, where would we be without our favorite Hondo Onaka?
My friends. Okay.
He is the most expensive card I've seen thus far. He cost 8 to buy him, so he's got to be really good. He has 4 attack, also gains you 4 resources when you play him. Jesus. He has the Scoundrel keyword, and when you purchase a card with a cost of 4 or more, you get to draw a card. So if you play him, gain those 4 resources, and spend those 4 resources buying some expensive unit, you get to draw another card, which could get you more resources to buy more stuff.
And for those of you who have the original version of the game, yes, you can mix and match factions against each other as long as you're doing one deck is for each faction. So you have to start with a Rebel starter deck or start with a Separatist starter deck. You cannot mix your Rebel and Republic starter decks together. Also, when you build the Galaxy deck, you include all the cards from each player's chosen faction.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to getting this because I love the Clone Wars. I love this game set in the Galactic Civil War. I'm definitely going to love this game set in the Clone Wars. This is the only reason it's not on my pre-order list yet is because the store hasn't started pre-orders on it.
They just announced it.
Indeed. Yep. All right. Well, we hope you guys have some time this summer to check out some of that cool new Star Wars gaming. And speaking of cool stuff, let's do Derrick's favorite part of the show, which is going to throw me for a loop. So, brace yourselves.
I'll go last, I guess.
It's supposed to be, what Star Wars T-shirts are we wearing?
Derrick,
I agree. Let's let
we got to connect it to the gaming.
Oh, that's true. So
Okay.
Derrick doesn't have a T-shirt but he has something related to Star Wars gaming that should not be. It's a card from Star Wars Unlimited from Fantasy Flight Games, whom Derrick said of this product, I will never buy this because I'm tired of FFG and their card game nonsense. And yet, alone amongst the three of us on the show, Derrick has a Star Wars Unlimited card, and the rest of us do.
After Scott and I talked about how we're definitely going to buy into this game,
I still haven't bought into it.
and we have not.
haven't.
And you know why? Because of FFG shenanigans. I love the deck building game, but they are currently having supply shenanigans with both set 1 and set 2.
So here
Now,
we have
to
a
be
Star
fair,
Wars
I didn't
Unlimited
buy
card.
this from FFG. I bought this from eBay, so I bought it from someone.
All right, sure. Okay, so all right, I'm dying to know what was it that made you at least change a tiny little bit of I'm never buying a Star Wars Unlimited.
you guys know that, like, so, obviously I've shown you guys, hey, my personal collection of some of my expensive Star Wars CCG cards that I got custom
for
slabs
sure, yeah.
done, right? So
Yeah.
I'm putting together, like I said, a second list of stuff, right, with the Darth Maul foil, the Luke Jedi foil, the General
That's just
Solo foils,
That,
all the
that's
stuff
enough
that I'm
money.
hundreds of dollars right there.
That's enough money in your
Thousands of
hand
dollars
to
again,
like
right?
buy a used EV. You know, I'm just saying. Anyway,
So, and again, I'm going to get custom slabs made for it. I actually, in the Star Wars CCG graded group, we've been doing contests that a couple of admins run it. So they have these categories where you can do highest graded cards. Then they have most unique pair, and then they have lowball. Because obviously everyone in the grading likes high level cards, but there's people that like uniquely, right, want some cards that are low scoring, right?
Yeah.
Somebody, I can't remember once, but they literally want one of every Millennium Falcon. They want a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 of the Millennium Falcon in graded form.
yeah.
Okay?
This is my beat up, really terrible condition Falcon,
Yeah.
but I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, so like I got this one because I got the theme for May was lightsabers. So you had to submit 2 cards, and I submitted my Luke Skywalker Rebel Scout. So if you guys recall, he has the green lightsaber right when he's coming out from the woods there to attack the speeder bike. And then I have the Mara Jade Ultrafoil, which is the one picture of Mara Jade, right, where she's got her pink or purple lightsaber. But then my custom slabs have lightsabers on it too to match that lightsaber, right? So I ended up winning it, and I got this really cool IG-88 with riot gun foil, and then it's custom
Iggy Pop
slab
with
though.
blaster. Yeah, nice.
So it's kind of cool in the
that's
background,
cool.
right? Matches the background of the card, right? It's kind of hard with the glare, but it matches, right? So anyways,
yeah.
so that's what I want to do because I love these HDA custom slabs and stuff. So I've decided there's 2 cards I want to get that are not these super expensive hyperspace that are like $400 or $500 a piece. But I did get the one, and I'm trying to work on getting the other one. Can you guess who it is?
I'm gonna guess Grand Moff Tarkin. It's a terrible guess, but that's my guess.
I'm going to guess Chewbacca because that's who it would be for me.
Yes. Both of you are wrong.
Yeah, I figured, but I can't.
Oh, it's
even
Sabine.
tell.
It's Sabine Wren. Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's foil Sabine, and she's standing in front of some of her graffiti artwork on a wall.
Yeah, and there's
as
like
she-
a death,
as she's
like a
dual-wielding
stormtrooper or
her-
Hoth trooper's helmet
Yeah,
crossed
she's
off there.
dual
and
wielding
stuff.
her blasters. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a foil,
So-
right? So
Yeah.
so I'm gonna get this one, and then there's another one of her too. Because the problem is the hero version of her, the leader version, I should say, the main character is without her helmet, which is fine. She's cool and all that stuff, but I really like it with the Mando helmet, right? Because to me, that's what Sabine is, right? So, but there's the store promo, league promo you can get that has the foil version of her too, and a different picture frame, which is really cool. So I want to get that one too. So this was like $350, like, so it was no big deal, right? You know what I'm saying? So I bought it off someone else, right? So
Yeah. So I saw on one of our North Carolina Star Wars Unlimited groups, old school friend of the show, back when we used to do a lot of Star Wars Destiny in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg County area of North Carolina, Trevor and his dad were big into Destiny, and they're also big into Star Wars CCG from Decipher. Trevor and his friends had taken a bunch of Star Wars Unlimited cards, reformatted the borders for the artwork so that they're not copying FFG, and made image alters that had photo stills from the movies from Star Wars CCG put as artwork on Star Wars Unlimited cards. Game text and all the icons remain the same, but instead of the drawings, we have like Tarkin and
still frame.
They used the still frame for the Jedi Pack Tarkin as their Star Wars Unlimited Tarkin, which I thought looked really awesome. And then, there's a card in Unlimited called Super Laser Blast. It's basically Wrath of God and wipes the field. They use the
primary
ignition, the green stuff going through the tunnel on the Death Star as the artwork. And the text box, because there's not much text on that card, is like this big. And then the whole thing is just...
Nice.
So I'm like,
So
this
custom
is
cards,
great.
cool.
I would, if I could somehow get a whole set of custom printed image like that, I would play the game and like, I'd take it to tournaments and just dare them to disqualify me.
Yeah.
I'd be like, come on, how could you possibly? Because look how awesome these cards are.
I'll just play my own little tournament. Neener.
That's right. I have my own tournament with blackjack and hookers. All right. Anyway.
So to be fair, I still haven't actually bought. I haven't even played a game yet.
Sure, man. Whatever. You're an absolute sellout.
Cards because I mean, to be fair, like at least this artwork isn't as bad as some of the others, right?
That's
like,
true.
This one's actually pretty good artwork on it. It's a foil. Like I said, the other one's pretty cool too. That's got the hyperspace, so it doesn't have any borders on it. So like I said, I'm gonna get those two and decide which one I want to submit for my custom slab because it's to be
good times.
So.
Cool. All right. Well, I do have a Star Wars T-shirt on. I liked this whole thing about the Acolyte being in a heretofore unexplored time zone of Star Wars, and it kind of reminded me of Solo and how that was somewhat an unexplored area of storytelling in Star Wars. We'd heard a lot about Han's early adventures with Chewie and the Falcon and Lando, but never actually seen it, and then we got to see it in that movie. Such a fun film. So I'm wearing my classic red, almost Magnificent Seven Western riding off into the sunset Star Wars Solo shirt, and it looks as good as ever. Nathan, what you got?
I have a new shirt today, so I'm very excited about this. I bought this at the Mighty Meeple, which is just north of Charlotte in Concord. And I saw it. I thought, oh, man, I've got to get that. It is the Indoor National Forest, U.S. Department of Agriculture. Welcome to Indoor.
That's awesome. And the shirt is green, of course, and it has the classic brown and yellow United States Forestry Service signage.
Yeah, so I saw
That's
that up at the game store. I thought this is going to be what I'm wearing on Sunday because that is an excellent shirt for this segment of the show.
Outstanding. Well, if you guys out there want to get your own cool Star Wars T-shirt from What a Piece of Junk and Friends, you can check out the Fandom Podcast Network store over at tpublic.com. Just search up Fandom Podcast Network out there in the search bar, and you can find T-shirts, mouse pads, coffee mugs, etc. And just really support the show, and we would love it. Derrick, why don't you let people know where they can find us out there on the internet?
So you can find us on the master feed, which is the fpnet.podbean.com, which is obviously off the Podbean app. But you can really find us on any major podcast network streaming platform: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. Obviously YouTube, right? Because we do this. You can find us on YouTube. So go over to the FPNet Fandom Podcast Network YouTube page. You can then find us mainly on the Facebook, where we do a lot of stuff. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. Email Scott for whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. The Twitter is at What Wars that Kyle runs. Instagram is the Fandom Podcast Network. And then obviously one of the things that we always ask that people when they stream or download us off any podcast platform is to leave us a review. Nathan, why do we ask that they leave us a review?
Well, the big reason we ask people to leave us reviews is because it helps other people find our podcast. It also lets us know what we're doing well, what we could be doing better. What do you want to get out of this show? And if you don't leave us reviews, don't leave us comments, don't leave us 5-star reviews, then I can't say what's going to happen, but I do know it won't involve weapons.
Good times. Well, anyway, thank you very much for joining us, everybody, on this show. We have loved reviewing the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte, and we look forward to talking about the rest of the season as we go on. But until next time, please make sure to tell us whatever you want us to do to make the show better and more enjoyable for you. And as always, please respect each other and respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.